Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. I am Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am happy to be here with you. I always love and enjoy being here and able to speak with you, everybody, about the issues that are affecting us every single day that make a difference in our lives. And it's important to do so. And we do it in more than just a 30-second soundbite or a minute and a half on the news. We actually go in depth on these issues because they're important. They make a difference, and they deserve to have more time dedicated to them than the major news media will often do. Now, today, we have a very special episode because it's a little different than what we normally do. This is a reaction to what I heard. I was listening. I listen every day to or almost every day, to the local news media, in particular the talk radio up in Utica and also here in the Binghamton Southern Tier region, which is WNBF, which is run by Bob Joseph. And on the program today, there was a candidate, former Mayor Matt Ryan, who is running for the Broome County Sheriff on the Working Families ticket, that line, Working Families. And for people who are not familiar with Working Families, they are directly associated with Citizen Action and also Black Lives Matters, that far left region of the whole political spectrum. And so that's where Matt Ryan is going. He got 30 votes, 30 signatures to get him onto the ballot, and now he's running and trying to become the Broome County Sheriff. And it's very important to understand his reasons. Now, something I want to get into, let's understand, who are we talking about? When we say Matt Ryan is running, who is Matt Ryan? I mean, many people may recall him from when he was a mayor for Binghamton, and he won 2 terms and he was in office, but not everyone remembers exactly what he did. And this is a matter of his record. It's not picking on him, but we want to make sure, because there are some questions about Matt Ryan running for this office and his politics to the far extreme of the left. He is a well-known advocate of citizen action and that far left extremism. Now, Matt Ryan was responsible, if people remember, going back to 2011. And this is important because it deals with, if he wants to become the Broome County Sheriff, he would be a law enforcement agent, which means he is supposed to enforce the laws as they exist in this state, in the city of Binghamton. And so it's very important to understand, how does he deal with laws that conflict with his political views? And he brings this up himself in the discussion with Bob Joseph. So I just want to get that background. And so back in November of 2011, in October of 2011, there was the Occupy movement, Occupy Wall Street, and then there was a version of that came into Binghamton, which was called the Occupy Binghamton movement. And in that movement, we saw a group of people, various far left individuals, some of them with Citizen Action, Black Lives Matters. That entire segment took over a portion of a public property, public park in downtown Binghamton. And they did this, and in doing so, they violated no less than 3 city ordinances for the city of Binghamton. They broke the law. They actively were breaking the law, which had the potential, as at that time, what we were seeing across the country in about 29 different cities, that these Occupy movements were costing those cities in lawsuits and damages at that time, at least $19 million as of November 22nd of 2011, and potentially had the opportunity to cost the city of Binghamton millions in lawsuits and or potential fines. And that's something, and I did several articles on this at the time on mvass.com. I will include the links there about the questions that I asked of Mayor Ryan and the office of the Mayor of Binghamton at that time, addressing the fact that we were allowing a group of individuals with a certain political preference to violate and break the laws of the city of Binghamton, that if anyone else who had a different political view that didn't match that of Mayor Ryan wouldn't be able to do. And the city of Binghamton really didn't answer that. Mayor Ryan didn't address that. He just kind of danced around and saying it's not really a big deal. It's not really a problem. It's okay because there is no lawsuit at this time and it's not really costing us anything, except it was costing the city of Binghamton something because we had officers that were there. We had damage to the property, to the park. We had the influence of those groups on businesses in the downtown area. It cost us. And most importantly, it was a violation of law that a mayor who believed in those same political viewpoints allowed to happen. Imagine that. You had a group of individuals going to downtown Binghamton, breaking the law, and the mayor allowed it and forgave them their crimes. What would the chief law enforcement officer in the county do in that same situation? If he agreed with the violation of law that these individuals were doing, are we to take it that he would break those laws again? This is his record. I'm not picking on Mayor Ryan because of anything other than this is his record. This is what he did. And in fact, even in 2011, there were other Democrats that disagreed with this. There was City Council President Charles Kramer, who disagreed with it and was quoted on that. We see Democratic 2nd District Councilman Martin Gerchman also disagreed with this Occupy movement and the violation of law that came from it. And again, I have articles that will quote that, and you can look that up yourself. I will include it in the link here so that you can look it up. But the exact titles, just so you know, the title of one article was The Office of Mayor Matt Ryan Responds to Questions About Occupy Binghamton and Costs. Another article, which was on November 22nd, Why is Occupy Binghamton Still in the Park? And another article, Occupy Binghamton, started with a roar, departs with a whimper, going over, and this was on January 17th of 2012, which went over what was the net result of Occupy Binghamton being in our parks and the net result to the city, which was really not much. We also have to address the fact that it was under Mayor Matt Ryan that there was a severe downsizing of the Binghamton police force. 20 police officers were removed from the police force, which at least Mayor Richard David, had alleged and stated as recently as in the, according to Press Connects, the Press and Sun online version, on November 7th of 2017, it was Mayor Richard David in his reelection noting that it was because of the cut of the 20 police officers from the Binghamton Police Department that led to the highest violent crime rate in 2 decades. I'm quoting from the article by Hannah Schwartz on November 7th, 2017. That article is Richard David Wins Binghamton Mayor's Race, will serve another 4 years. So there is some concern here. There's a large amount of concern that we have a precedent. There is a record to go by that Mayor Matt Ryan, former Mayor Matt Ryan running for the Broome County Sheriff's Office, is someone who seeks to, because of his political preference and without regard to law or for the needs of the public, seeks to punish and harm the police department and our law enforcement agencies restricting them and to allow individuals who agree with his political viewpoints to break laws that other citizens and residents in the city don't do. And he's done that. And we have to ask the question, what if someone who had his same political beliefs violates the law and he were sheriff? How would he act? It's a very big question. And in fact, that's one of the things that he brings up when he's talking to Bob Joseph. And when he's speaking to Bob Joseph, one of the first things that's asked is, why is he running? And the key part of what he said about when he was running, and you can go to WNBF. I'm sure they've got a copy of that article. I did tape the entire conversation, and I'll be playing excerpts of that to address them, because I found it very interesting. At 2 minutes, 27 seconds into their conversation between Bob Joseph and Matt Ryan gives us the reason of what he's looking to do. What is his goal in being the sheriff of Broome County? What is he really trying to do? And I think it's very interesting, and I want to play that clip just so that you can hear this for yourself, and then we'll talk about it.
So there's so many issues that I'm running on. One is fiscal responsibility as pertains to that office and all the duties they carry out. And the other is all the social justice issues of mass incarceration.
All right, folks. So you got to hear Matt Ryan responding to Bob Joseph about why is he running. So he mentioned two things, cost and social justice. Now, cost comes up a little bit later, and we'll talk about that in a little more in depth, because I believe, and it led to his statements about cutting the department, the Broome County Sheriff Department. But let's address the biggest thing, social justice. Where is that a law? Where is that in any law in New York State? It doesn't exist. It isn't part of our law. It is not established law. It's not pending law. This is just a political preference. He is talking about activism that he wants to put forward to be able to enact a partisan political viewpoint that he personally has. And it goes back to, and again, this is why I brought it up, his past record. When he had his personal partisan viewpoints led him to put up a war cost sign while he was mayor, costing the city of Binghamton thousands of dollars that gave no benefit to the people of Binghamton. He went and he allowed a group of individuals, the Occupy Binghamton movement, to take over and break the law because it supported a viewpoint he liked. And now we're looking at him saying that he wants to enact his personal political views of citizen action and Black Lives Matters and that segment of the far left, and impose that on law enforcement for the county of Broome. Where does that match up? That's insane to me. How dare you? That's not law. He is basically legislating through an elected office where he's supposed to be serving the public, and instead he is serving his political beliefs. He said it himself. His focus is on the social justice aspects. That's what he's looking for. Social justice does not exist in law, does not exist anywhere in the United States, as far as I know, and definitely not in New York State, and especially not in Broome County. It's not real. It is an idea of a political viewpoint from the far left that doesn't exist. And he wants to make sure you are affected by it. The citizens of Broome County in the southern tier of New York will be affected by his political viewpoint, whether you like it or not. That's an important thing. But there's more that he said, and I want to get into that, because he then goes into explain what he thinks about voters. It was very clear. He made a very clear statement. He was asked about voters and why he's running and what voters think and are doing. And so I want to play that portion of his answer as well. Again, this is all from his live statements on WNBF on July 26th. And you can go to WNBF for the full recording. I have recorded this. This is unedited copy of his speech. One moment.
One thing I don't understand is that people say they want good, clean government, but they don't. I mean, they don't really vote that way. They vote for people who they know are compromised. They vote for people who are using the system to get rich themselves.
I find that quite interesting to hear former Mayor Matt Ryan, the candidate, to come out and say his thoughts about voters and having such a low opinion of them. So he believes that people just don't know who they're voting for, that they don't know the issues that people are voting for, that because they don't necessarily, and I'm assuming here, but from the nature of his statement, that because they vote for people he doesn't like President Trump, who he brings up in this conversation with Bob Joseph, like State Senator Fred Akshar, he brings up in this conversation, basically anyone and everyone on any political viewpoint that he doesn't like, well, the public just has been duped, or they just don't understand what they're voting for, or they're voting for something that's negative, corruption. Not, mind you, we're talking about corruption. He's not mentioning Governor Cuomo. He didn't mention Governor Cuomo, who's surrounded by corruption and has a lot of issues. But no, that's okay. But he's talking about all the people who he disagrees with, and that their viewpoints and anyone who voted for those viewpoints are somehow wrong. And he's been on WNBF before, making extremist viewpoints about individuals who don't agree with him having somehow not understood or not being capable of understanding the issue. And he's done it many, many times. It was just 2 weeks ago when he, before the announcement that he was running for Broome County Sheriff, that he was on accusing people of, well, I don't even want to go into it because I don't have the tape on it, but he's made accusations against individuals who vote for a certain viewpoint that he doesn't like, and therefore somehow they're not knowledgeable enough to be able to make the vote or to know what they're doing, which is rather insulting. And again, it goes back to, how is this individual going to be interacting with other officers? He's going to be in charge. If he were to be elected, he would be in charge of the Broome County Sheriff Department. How is he going to be instructing his officers? And how is he going to be leading them if he believes that if they voted against the citizen action far left viewpoints, that he thinks they're idiots, or that he thinks they're voting for corruption? And so therefore, what's he going to do with them? Is he going to keep officers that, because they don't have the same viewpoints that he has, is he going to try and fire them because of those political viewpoints? That's a question. That's a very serious question. You have to ask it, because he's making himself very clear that he has this viewpoint, that he believes, as he just stated, that people vote for corruption and that they seemingly don't understand the issues at hand because they don't agree with him. Well, what's he going to do when he has the power that someone who doesn't agree with him voted against something he liked, and now he has the power to fire that person or to somehow restrict them in their duties? How's that going to help anyone? How does that move the nation forward? Especially when we know he's looking for social justice values that don't exist in law, just his political party and his political viewpoint from the far extreme. That says something. That's a very interesting thing. Now, I want to take another section, a quote from him. Actually, I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to come right back, and then we'll go into some of the other things he said, especially about, and I've made the statement that he is looking to be an activist sheriff. That's not because I believe so. These are the words of Matt Ryan himself, and I will provide you that audio clip as well when we come right back. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
I ain't had your waist. I don't even remember how you taste on my lips. Used to be something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause of where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed to. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the
Hello, everyone, and thank you for staying here with me at No Sound Bites Allowed podcast with your host, Michael Voss, myself, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and we do always appreciate every moment that you spend with us because you are the reason why we do this. You are the thing that I appreciate. Now, folks, as we're talking here, we're going over a couple of the different issues that I had in listening to and my reaction to the interview on WNBF on July 26th between Bob Joseph, the host of BinghamtonNow, and Matt Ryan, who is currently running for the Broome County Sheriff, mayor under the Working Families Party, which is a far-left segment of the Democratic Party. Not a Democrat, but progressive, part of the Citizen Action and Black Lives Matter movement. Now, I had mentioned previously when we first heard about Matt Ryan deciding that he wanted to run for for Broome County Sheriff, that on July 11th, I had made the statement on this program that I believed that Matt Ryan was looking to inject social justice into law enforcement and that was his ideal. And I've already gone over how he himself, between 227 and 242 in his conversation with Bob Joseph, says that is one of his primary and key goals. But he goes even further. And this is a major theme throughout his whole conversation. And at the 7-minute, 52-second mark, going into about 8 minutes, the 8th minute, 23rd second, he goes into a little bit more about the activism that he wants to enact as a Broome County Sheriff. Again, this is a very important thing, and it's a very clear thing to understand when looking at this candidate and that party and what they're looking to attain. And I think it's important for the public to know. So let me play that clip for you, and then we'll go into it a little more.
Talk about some specific changes. If you became sheriff of Broome County on January 1st, tell me about the specific changes, 3 specific changes that you would move to enact as a new sheriff.
Well, first of all, as one of the chief executive people, and there's not wholesale changes I could make immediately, but as the sheriff, I would be an activist sheriff who would.
Well, there you have it, folks. In his own words, he's going to be an activist sheriff. That's his goal. He wants to be an activist. That's not the role of the Broome County Sheriff. It is not in the definition of it. It is not in the law. It doesn't exist. He wants to be an activist. Now, again, he's being asked, what changes would you make? And his very first response is, my first change is I want to be an activist. Think about that. That's how important it is in his mind that when asked, you're going to make three changes you can make any three changes as a Broome County Sheriff if you were to be elected. What's the first thing that comes to his mind? I want to be an activist. I want to be able to enact political change, partisan political change. That's not what the law enforcement agent of Broome County is supposed to do. He is not a political position. It is not meant to go out there and advocate for laws or create laws or to enact law as he thinks it should be. That's not his position. If he wants to go and do that, he should run for another office, maybe as an assemblyman or state senator or Congress, if that's what he thinks. And maybe this is a stepping stone for him to try and get one of those positions. I don't know. But I have to believe he misunderstands what is the duty of the Broome County Sheriff, because it is not activism, and that is not his job to be an activist. That is not what that position is for. And it's very clear. And he made it very clear, and that's his first answer on that question. Now, he goes on and he talks about the activism that he wants to try and enact. And then Bob Joseph, who was the first person in that segment clip that I just played, Bob Joseph comes back to him and says, well, you haven't answered my question. What are the three? And he asked him to be very specific. What are the three things that you would change? Because that's important. What are the things that someone's going to vote for you that you're going to be able to do better than Sheriff Dave Harder or Deputy Jason Ellis, who's also running for the seat, that they would do? What is it that the public can say, okay, if I vote for this gentleman, what is he going to do? Not the activism, but the actual duties of the job. How is he going to promote that? And so I want to play you. This is it's now the 10 minutes, 14 seconds to 12 minutes, that section where he's answering what are the three changes that he's looking to enact.
Okay, one, I would convene a meeting of all people involved in the criminal justice system, anybody who would come, to talk about how we can incarcerate fewer people in our community, especially low-level offenders whose lives were destroyed. Second, I would go through all the sheriff's office procedures, and I would start making sure that everything they do, anything that happens at that jail, is communicated to the public in a transparent way. And I'll give you some examples why that's so important. We don't even know how to determine how to decrease the number of people incarcerated because there's not a real good system to find out who's locked up and why. And I think we could change that dramatically by getting people involved who are very interested in this issue from the university, we could start a program where every person that's locked up or considered to be locked up would be a thorough screening of their background and what incarceration is going to mean to them, and I would do that. Third, I would make sure that we take a thorough look at all the conditions at the jail, because as we know, people are committing suicide, people are going in there who have drug problems, who actually, you might get arrested and be on Suboxone. Did you know that you go to jail, you can't be on Suboxone, and then you have to go through a horrible withdrawal, and then if you're released, you're likely to go seek out heroin again or.
So that's interesting. So those are the three reasons or the three changes that Matt Ryan would make if he were to be elected as Broome County Sheriff. Let's really think about that. So his first thing is he wants to change the law. That's not what the Broome County Sheriff does. That's not the position of the chief of the law enforcement for the county. That is not it. Again, law enforcement enacts laws that exist as they exist and enforces them. That's it. He doesn't get to change the law, which is what he suggests, that he's going to get everyone together who's involved and to find ways to not incarcerate people. Excuse me, that's not your job. That's part one. That's the judicial branch, where people go into the courts, and that's a court issue as well as a legislative issue because it's based on the laws that have been enacted in our state. It has nothing to do with law enforcement. He's looking at the wrong branches of office. But then again, he's looking for activism. Again, how many times has he said that? He said that in the first 3 minutes of the conversation with Bob Joseph on WNBF. He said it again in around the 8th minute of this, that he's looking to be activist. He wants to be activism. He wants to change things. Wrong job. That's not what this is supposed to be about. Maybe that's what Citizen Action and Working Families and Black Lives Matters and definitely what Antifa may think about this, but that's not what the job description is. So his very first change isn't in his power. It's got nothing to do with him. He's wrong. Second thing that he wants to do is have a university program. He wants to find out what are the causes of crime. He wants to find out why people are incarcerated. Well, again, that has nothing to do with law enforcement. That has nothing to do with the duties of the job. He wants to have a program. Well, that's a university thing, so that's entirely different. That has to do with education and education systems and recording information. That has nothing to do with law enforcement. That isn't part of the purview of the Broome County Sheriff. That goes into the legislative branch. That has nothing to do with it. So why is he introducing these new powers and elements of a position that they don't apply? And it doesn't matter for the Broome County Sheriff why someone has been incarcerated. They are. Their job is to, one, properly enforce the law so that person is incarcerated for the proper amount of time, and to have the duties of the jail enacted according to the mandates of law that exist. It has nothing to do with figuring out why they got incarcerated. If he wants to be an attorney and argue that, he needs to go back to the judicial system and go back to being a public defender, which he's done, and he's had his failures and successes with that. And I've addressed that previously as well, this most recent failure that happened last year, where a gentleman went in and, he basically went in under 5 weapons charges and got convicted of 16. But that's separate. Okay, so if he wants to be a juror or fight against juries and in the judicial branch, he's running for the wrong office. He wants to be a judge. He can go be a judge and try and be an activist judge there if that's what he thinks. But instead, and this goes back to his comments about when in the 5th minute that he was speaking about voters being dumb. Does he think we're dumb enough not to understand that he's talking about duties that have nothing to do with the position he's running for, about activism that has no purpose in the position he's asking people to vote for him in, that people are not able to understand that he's looking to do things that are literally political preferences? I don't understand. Maybe he thinks we don't understand that, but it's very clear. And the third thing, of course, what he was talking about is the jail conditions. He finally addresses the one thing that actually applies to the Broome County Sheriff, the conditions of the jail. What he fails to mention to the public is almost every single aspect of prisoners and inmates in jails are regulated and mandated by the state. There's actually almost nothing that can be done because of the oversight and the micromanaging of the New York State legislature and the laws that have been put in place and the mandates that have been put down on the counties by the governor of New York and the legislative branch of New York State, that there's very little room to do things in, because everything has to be the number of calories that the inmates receive, when they can receive food, the type of food they're receiving, It's outsourced. Who can outsource and get and make those bids to provide the food? There's very little that can be done there. And also the fact that drugs are not allowed in jails. They're not allowed in prisons. You can't just give them. These aren't pharmacists. Your Broome County sheriffs are not pharmacists. They're not doctors. They're not there to have a drug rehab program. That's not their job. That's not their position. And I understand that Matt Ryan may have this idea that suddenly he can go in and he can prescribe medications to individuals that may or may not work. There are issues with the drug he's speaking about. And he may have this idea of how to help people get off of heroin, which may or may not be correct. That's a different issue. And that's about legislation. Again, that's about legislation and trying to resolve an issue that has nothing to do with law enforcement. Again, he's talking about things that have nothing to do with the position he's running for, but it has everything to do with his political preference, his activism, and his desire to do what he wants, regardless of what the public may want or what his position is supposed to do. That is important, and that's very scary. Think about how single-minded he's coming across here, how well he's making himself sound, or rather how well he's presenting this very single-minded political partisan preference that he has that we should all go with. Because he thinks that it's the right idea, we should allow that to happen, even though it isn't in law, it is not in his job description, it is not even in the same branches of government that he's trying to do. So I think that's very important. And he's being very clear. These are his words that are saying this. And it's just a moment of just reflecting on it and saying, well, you can't. Those aren't your duties. That's not the job. And that's very wrong. And then I want to go on because throughout this whole conversation, as he's having it with Bob Joseph, we see several times that Matt Ryan is just going off on flights of fancy. He doesn't like being criticized. He doesn't like being questioned about these things. And you may have heard this already when he's speaking to Bob Joseph, especially about the three that he makes. And I do advise you, listen to the whole conversation on WNBF. And if for some reason WNBF does not publish it, I will be happy to publish the entire conversation, 24 minutes, unedited, so that people can listen to that and reference this. But what we hear him go on, he starts suddenly making accusations. Part of the reason why he wants to run is because of State Senator Fred Akshar, who is not a sheriff. He's a state senator, has nothing to do with this. He mentions about President Trump, who's not running for Broome County Sheriff, has nothing to do with this. And then he starts making accusations, third-hand stories that have no credentials whatsoever, not in any news article. Nowhere is it mentioned. He's just making a story saying someone told him about something and he thinks that's a reason for him to run. That's exactly what he says. And I wanted to frame that very clearly. He heard from someone else about a situation that happened years ago and he's trying to make a comment on it now. That's hearsay. That is attacking your opponent's character without giving that person the chance to defend themselves, without any foundation on this. This is completely unfounded. And I think any candidate for any office that does that, personally, I find it to be the lowest form of politics. It's the worst thing you can do. Never accuse someone of something that you can't prove. I'm going over what he says word for word. I'm providing articles so that you can see this. You don't make unfounded accusations. That's the worst thing. That's the worst thing because it means to me that you have no way of verifying exactly what you're talking about. But in the 16th minute, 16:13 to 16:49, he decides he wants to have a flight of fancy and talk about some hearsay information that he heard, and that's a justification for him to run for office. And these are the words of Matt Ryan directly.
Some of the law enforcement, I was told by a story by one of law enforcement that Sheriff Harder inserted himself in a situation up in Shenango Forks or Fort Crane one day where put a lot of law enforcement people, because of his age and his trying to assert something he shouldn't have been doing because of he's just not shouldn't be on the street with a gun now enforcing crime or trying to stop crime. And he put some officers in pretty bad position up in a situation up in Port Crane a few years back.
Wow. Just wow. That's just so bad. It's insulting. How dare any candidate go in years ago? We don't know if any of this is actually true. He's just making a hearsay statement. Somebody years ago, there was this event that happened, and who knows when Matt Ryan was told about this. It could have been years ago, could have been yesterday, who knows. This person, who knows who they are, could be a disgruntled person, could be accurate, I don't know, tells him this story based on that person's opinion of what happened. We're getting a story about an opinion from another person. This is third hand. How dare you? How dare you? If someone decided to tell a third-hand story, years ago, Matt Ryan, I was around him, someone told me that he went out and he did something that, was negative. What? Well, can't prove that. What's that mean, Mike? It's not important, right? Isn't that the answer you would give me? I know that's the answer that Matt Ryan would give me. That's absolutely irrelevant. How can you say that? How dare you say that? Because that's unfounded. There's nothing to it. Well, then, Matt Ryan, why are you doing that to Dave Harder? Sheriff Dave Harder deserves better than that. Any candidate deserves better than some unfounded story from God knows when, based on someone's opinion that you have no idea about. That's just wrong. And is this the way that he's going to operate if he were to be elected, that he would go out there and say, well, I heard from someone else years ago that you did something and I don't like that. And then he's going to punish them for that because it's part of the social justice? Is that his viewpoint? Is that the way he looks at it? Because it's social justice. You did something that wasn't, very much along the lines of citizen action and Black Lives Matters, in my opinion. And therefore, because someone told me about that you did it years ago, you're going to get punished going forward. Is that what we're to expect? And imagine if he is elected and that is his viewpoint, which is unclear, but I'm asking, based on his words, I have to ask the question, how do you think the other sheriffs, the other officers that would be working under him if he were to be elected, how would they react? How is that going to help the public if that's the kind of reaction that they're going to have to live with? And those are the viewpoints that they have to deal with. I mean, that doesn't help anyone. That doesn't improve public safety. It doesn't serve anybody. It's just a very bad indication of his leadership. And he's talking about, this is all about leadership. He's looking at leadership, talking about other individuals who are not part of the Broome County Sheriff Department as being his reasons for running. That's not leadership. It's got nothing to do with that. His social activism has nothing to do with it. It's just insane. It's worse and worse the more he tells us what's really going on. Because the more we understand, the more we see it has nothing to do with the Broome County Sheriff or serving the public or protecting the public. It has everything to do about his political agenda and advancing and pushing that onto people, whether they know it or not and whether they want it or not. But there is one final thing that I wanted to take from this clip, and this is in the 18th minute, about what does he plan to do with the department? There are questions out there, and he did not like being asked this. He did not like being questioned about whether or not what his plans were for the Broome County Sheriff Department, which he alluded to at the very beginning, back in the second minute there. As I mentioned, he alluded to the fact that he's looking at making changes and speaking about, I believe it was in his three choices there in the 10th minute, about the costs that are associated with Broome County Department. Well, he goes into it even further, talking about his plans, and he talks about, and this is a very short clip, but it's very important because it leaves a very big question about the size of the department, the appropriate size of the department. And I think it's a clear indication of what his plans are for the department going forward. And I'm going to play that for you right now.
I will appropriately size the Sheriff's Department so that $26 million budget will be trimmed, I believe, without impacting the safety of our community, and it will save taxpayers a lot of money.
Really? That's interesting. He's going to make the Broome County Sheriff Department an appropriate size. Exactly what does that mean? What's the appropriate size for there? Because that definitely defines a number of positions. As I understand it, when you're talking about the size of a police force, a fire department, when you're talking about public services, you're not talking about the size of the vehicles they're driving. You're not talking about the size of the building that they're in. You're talking about the workers, the police force, the actual individuals who are going out there and doing it. That's the size of a department. It's not some physical, it's not the size of their desks or their chairs. I'm not being facetious. I'm being very serious here. I'm trying to get to a very clear point that we're not talking about some kind of material object that he's speaking about. He's talking about the appropriate size of the personnel. And that is a very big question, because we saw this very same mindset, although he's now had a lot more experience. But back when he was the former mayor of Binghamton, we heard the same statements about how he has to cut the costs and get things to balance the budget and to cut the size of the force that he felt was bloated by cutting 20 officers, which, according to Mayor Richard David in 2017, led to the highest crime rates that the city of Binghamton had seen in decades. Now, that's very interesting to me, that he's looking to take that same mentality of let's cut the department, a department that he feels is not socially just, a department that he feels is not living up to the far left standards of citizen action and Black Lives Matters and Matt Ryan. And he's looking to make the size appropriate as he goes forward with his activism in that office to enact laws that don't exist, to enact social justice that is not a law on the books anywhere in New York State or the nation, to my knowledge. And he's going to go out there and put out his political views and subject the public to that. That's very scary. That's terrifying. And these are his words. I'm taking direct quotes. This is directly from his conversation on July 26th on WNBF with Bob Josheph on the BinghamtonNow program. These are his words. These are his statements, and I'm putting it completely into context. And if for any reason WNBF does not publish the entire interview, 24 minutes, I will be happy to do so, because I've time-stamped every conversation I'm saying exactly where he has said this. I will be happy to publish that if Bob Josheph does not, if WNBF does not, because I want people to know this is what Matt Ryan is looking at. And from my understanding and in conclusion, from what I can determine from this, he could care less about the Broome County Sheriff's actual job. He could care less about enforcing laws and anything else other than his social justice values, his far left, hyper left political ideals. This is about ideology. That's what he's looking at. I don't know if he's trying to use this to try and find a way to leverage himself back into another election to try and get into some other legislative seat, because when he left, he had 30% approval ratings, and people were very upset with him and what he had done and the impact he had left in the city of Binghamton in. So maybe this is his way to get back into that arena. I don't know. Now I'm making a supposition there, not an accusation, a supposition based on fact. These are facts. But I don't understand. What I can tell you, though, is based on what he has said, not just from this and knowing his history of being more than willing to violate the law, as he did in 2011 as a mayor of the city of Binghamton. He actively violated the law to promote his own political viewpoints, activism, going out there and supporting the furthest left viewpoints, putting the citizens at risk, financially at risk, and actually in some cases physically at risk of danger to themselves, because he had a viewpoint that he liked, and so everyone else has to deal with it. That same mentality is now being expressed here in his run for the Broome County Sheriff, in his own words, as he has said several times in this conversation. I find it dangerous. It is bad. And I need to admit, I know Matt. I've had many, many conversations with Matt personally. They're private conversations. I won't get into them. But I've had many conversations with Matt, and we don't agree. But I have to tell you that anyone who would propose to do the things that he is saying right now, to be an activist in a law enforcement position, to enact some ideals that do not exist in law, and to be able to, and projecting the idea that he is going to, or they would somehow modify that police force to be able to more fully realize their partisan political ideals. I don't care if they're conservative or Republican or anything else. I would be against that. And I have been, and I have to be against this. This is my personal view. This is my personal reaction to the conversation on WNBF. And I would love to hear others who tell me that in listening to these words that I have not been absolutely correct in my understanding of what Matt Ryan is saying he's planning to do and what that impact would be to the public. Because I see it as being a negative, and people should be aware. Because I don't agree with his comments in the 5th minute about what voters do. I think voters are informed, and when they're properly informed with the information, they make the proper decision. And I don't agree with him on that. But we'll see. We will see. And as always, I am more than happy to have Matt Ryan come on and speak about this and any of his comments that he would like. I'll give him as much time as he likes. I will be reaching out to Sheriff Dave Harder and also Jason Ellis about their runs for this position for the Broome County Sheriff and their thoughts. And we'll be publishing that as well. So with that said, I thank everyone for being here with us. I hope it was informative. I hope you found it interesting. Please do look into this more and make your own decision, whatever it may be. I think it's just a very eye-opening conversation and needed to be shared with everyone. But with that said, I'm going to leave you with an appropriate song, I think. And I hope everyone will be well.
Signals coming from a canyon, and I've been searching for my companion for so long. Look out, here comes the dawn. Look to my left, look to my right, searching for something, but something ain't right. This glass ain't full, it's fucking empty. Cowboys and Indians, I'll be the cowboy, you be the Indian. I'll shoot my rifle, you shoot your arrows of blue. Struck once, twice, 3 times a charm. Beautiful woman with a deadly arm. If love weren't a game, I'd be play cowboys and Indians. Let's play cowboys and Indians. Let's play all night long. Smoke signals coming from a canyon. I've been searching for my companion for so long.